Max, a Belgian Malinois, was no ordinary K9. His sleek coat, alert posture, and amber eyes spoke of countless hours of training and dedication. He wasn't just a dog. He was Officer Ethan Mercer's partner. They had worked together for 3 years, a bond built on trust, loyalty, and an unspoken understanding. Each day their routine was the same: a brisk morning run, a quick breakfast, and then hours of focused work, walking through airports, checking luggage, and scanning crowds. It was the kind of job that demanded precision and focus, but for Max it was natural. He had a sharp instinct, one that could sense when something was off even before it became obvious to others. "Ethan, you sure about this?" Officer Garcia asked one day, eyeing Max as the Malinois sat beside Mercer. Mercer smiled, scratching the dog behind the ears. "She's got instincts you can't teach. Max always knows when something's wrong." Max's response was subtle, a slight tilt of the head, his eyes never leaving the crowd. He was a trained professional, yet to Mercer, Max was family. He had saved Mercer's life on more than one occasion. "You think we're going to catch anything today?" Mercer asked as they passed through the security checkpoint. Max gave no response. He didn't need to. He was focused, alert, and ready for whatever came next. The hours ticked by, each flight arriving with passengers from all over the world. A nervous college student returning from Amsterdam with marijuana. A businessman from Mexico City sneaking undeclared jewelry. A family from Southeast Asia with fruits that weren't allowed. Nothing serious, just the usual minor offenses. But Max was always at the ready, his mind working, his nose constantly sniffing for danger. As the day stretched into evening, Mercer noticed Max grow restless. The dog paced back and forth, his tail flicking nervously. "What's got you stirred up, girl?" Mercer muttered, feeling the unease spread between them. Max's response came as a low growl, her ears pricking forward as she locked eyes on a woman entering the terminal. She pushed a stroller, her movements jittery, eyes darting nervously. Mercer glanced at her. Something didn't feel right. "Just a routine check," Mercer said, forcing calm into his voice as he moved to intercept her. But Max wasn't calm. The dog's behavior was unlike anything Mercer had seen before. Max's instinct was screaming, and it was the kind of feeling Mercer had learned to trust. "Stay close, Max," Mercer murmured. But the dog was already a few steps ahead. She was focused, her eyes fixed on the stroller. The woman's gaze flickered from the K9 to the officer, her grip tightening on the stroller handle. "Can you keep that dog away from my baby?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Mercer nodded, trying to reassure her, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. Max wasn't backing down. There was something hidden beneath that stroller, something Max was determined to find. "Max, check," Mercer ordered. The Malinois responded instantly, stepping closer, nose to the air. She whined softly, a sign Mercer knew meant she was onto something serious. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a night that would change everything. The ordinary had just turned into the extraordinary. Max's bond with Mercer wasn't just about work. It was about trust. And Max's instincts were about to reveal a secret that would test that trust in ways they could never imagine. The airport was calm. Another typical evening shift for Officer Ethan Mercer and his K9 partner Max. The final flight of the day was being processed, and most passengers had already cleared customs. Mercer felt the familiar exhaustion creeping in, but he knew it was almost over. "Just one more flight, girl," he muttered to Max, giving her a quick pat on the head. Max, a sleek Belgian Malinois, was always by his side, alert, ready, and sharp as ever. They made their rounds through the terminal, passing the scattered few who were still lingering in the quiet airport. Max moved with purpose, sniffing the air as they walked. But then, without warning, Max's attention snapped to something across the terminal. Mercer followed her gaze. It was a woman, pushing a stroller, her eyes flicking nervously around the space. She seemed out of place, the tension in her posture unmistakable. Max's body stiffened, her ears perked, her eyes narrowing on the woman. The sudden change in her behavior caught Mercer's attention immediately. "What's wrong, girl?" Mercer asked softly. He was used to Max's sharp instincts, but this was different. Max wasn't just focused, she was fixated, her whole body tense with anticipation. Then it happened. Max began to growl, a deep, low rumble that vibrated through her chest. Mercer frowned. Max had never behaved like this. Her growl grew louder, and soon she started barking incessantly, her paws stomping on the floor as she tugged at her leash. "Max, stop," Mercer ordered, trying to calm her. But Max wasn't listening. She kept barking, her eyes never leaving the stroller. The woman, clearly frightened, tried to push the stroller away, her face flushing with panic. "Can you get that dog away from my baby?" she asked, her voice shaking. Mercer stepped forward, trying to appear calm, but his gut was twisting with unease. There was something in the air, something Max had picked up on. He could feel it now, too. "Ma'am, everything's fine," Mercer said, his voice steady but with a hint of caution. "Just a routine check." But Max wasn't having it. She lunged forward again, growling, her body vibrating with energy. The woman jerked back, clutching the stroller tightly. "Please, keep that dog away from us," she cried. Mercer's heart was racing. "Max, heel," he commanded, his voice sharp. But Max wasn't listening. She had never disobeyed before, not like this. Max's instincts were telling her something that Mercer couldn't see yet but felt in every tense muscle of the dog's body. The woman was hiding something and Max wasn't about to. Let it go. As the woman tried to pull the stroller away, Mercer's eyes scanned the scene, the unease growing in the pit of his stomach. Why was Max acting like this? What was she sensing that no one else could? "Let me check the stroller, ma'am," Mercer said, his tone firm but trying to stay calm. The woman's face twisted in fear. "No, please. My baby's fine." But Max wouldn't back down. Her growl deepened, her nose sniffing the air, more intense than ever. There was no mistaking it now. Something was very wrong. Mercer knew he had to act. What was Max trying to tell him? Max's growls echoed through the terminal, a low rumble that sent a ripple of tension through the air. Officer Ethan Mercer's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to regain control. Max had never acted like this before, not in 3 years of working together. His eyes locked onto the stroller, his body vibrating with intensity. "Max, heel," Mercer commanded, his voice firm but laced with uncertainty. The Malinois didn't respond. She lunged again, her muscles coiling like a spring, her focus fixed on the woman and her child. The woman, now visibly distressed, yanked the stroller backward, her fingers trembling as she tried to push it further away. "Please, keep your dog away from us." Her voice cracked, fear lacing her every word. Mercer's stomach twisted. There was something wrong here. Max was picking up on something that Mercer couldn't see yet. He took a step forward, trying to stay calm. "Ma'am, everything's fine, just routine." But Max wouldn't stop. The dog's growling grew, louder, and before Mercer could react, Max launched herself forward again, knocking the stroller slightly. The woman screamed, pulling back, but it was too late. The stroller tipped, sending the blanket that had covered the baby sliding to the floor. A glint of something metallic caught Mercer's eye. His breath caught in his throat as he saw what was beneath the blanket. A gun. A chill ran down Mercer's spine. A Glock 19 gleaming under the harsh lights of the terminal, its safety off. The sight of it made Mercer's pulse race. This wasn't just a routine check anymore. Something darker was unfolding right in front of him. "Gun!" "Everybody, down," a voice shouted, and instantly chaos erupted. Security rushed forward, hands on their weapons, and the few remaining passengers in the terminal scattered in fear. Max stood frozen for a moment, still alert, her eyes locked on the stroller, her body tense. It was as if she knew that the danger wasn't over yet. The situation had spiraled out of control and Mercer's mind raced to keep up. He had to act fast. There was no time to waste. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," Mercer said, trying to control his voice. But the urgency was clear. The woman didn't respond, her eyes wide with terror as she backed away further. Max's behavior wasn't random. She had sensed something long before the gun was revealed. Something in the woman's posture, her movements, her frantic energy. It had all set Max on edge. And now, Max had uncovered the truth. The woman's lips trembled as she stood still, her face pale. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered, barely audible. Mercer's hand hovered near his holster, every instinct telling him to remain calm, to think clearly. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a gun. There was a story hidden behind it, and Max had uncovered it. As more officers arrived and the area was secured, Mercer's mind raced. What was this woman involved in? Why had Max reacted this way? And most importantly, who was she protecting and from what? Max had done what she was trained to do. She had sniffed out the danger when no one else could. But now, the real questions were just beginning to surface. Melissa Chen sat across from Officer Ethan Mercer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with an unsettling mix of fear and exhaustion. The dim light of the interrogation room cast long shadows over her, but it was clear that whatever was happening was more than just a simple misunderstanding. Max, still by Mercer's side, had remained silent but vigilant, watching the woman carefully. Max's instincts hadn't failed them yet, and Mercer wasn't about to ignore what she had uncovered. "Ma'am, you need to be honest with me," Mercer said, his voice calm but firm. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes not leaving hers. "This gun, it's not just for protection, is it?" Melissa shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm not a criminal, I never wanted this." Mercer watched her carefully, his gaze unwavering. Max was still on alert, her body tense, her eyes locked on the woman. The dog seemed to understand something deeper, sensing the weight of Melissa's words. "I left him," Melissa continued, her voice breaking. "Robert, he's not who you think he is. He's not just my partner, he's an abuser. He controls everything in my life, and I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave, for my son's sake." Mercer's heart tightened. He'd seen a lot in his years with the K9 unit, but the desperation in Melissa's voice was unlike anything he'd heard before. She wasn't lying. This wasn't some elaborate scheme. There was real fear behind her words. "The gun," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "It was Robert's. I took it when I left. I knew he'd come after us. I had to protect my son. He's been tracking us, watching every move I make." Mercer exchanged a glance with his team. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but something still didn't feel right. If Robert was truly a threat, why hadn't Melissa reached out for help sooner? "You fled with your child," Mercer said softly, his tone gentler now. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" Melissa wiped her eyes. "I tried," she whispered. "But he has connections. He's got friends everywhere. The police won't help. He threatened me. He said no one would believe me. I was afraid. For my life. For Benjamin's life. That gun, it was my only way out." Max let out a soft whine, as if to echo the pain in Melissa's voice. She looked down at the dog, her gaze softening for a moment. "I never wanted to be in this position," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to protect my son." Mercer stayed silent for a moment, processing everything Melissa had said. His instincts told him she was telling the truth. But there was still so much left unanswered. Why had she tried to flee with a weapon? Why hadn't she turned to anyone for help? "Let's focus on your safety first," Mercer finally said, standing up and signaling for his team to step back. "We'll figure out the rest, but you're not alone anymore. We'll protect you and your son." Melissa's eyes filled with gratitude, but the fear didn't leave her face. She had risked everything to escape, and yet the hardest part was still ahead, keeping her son safe from a man who would stop at nothing to regain control. Mercer glanced down at Max, the dog's steady presence, offering a silent promise. Max had known from the start that something wasn't right, and now Mercer knew too. There was more to this story than he could see. Max stood still, his amber eyes locked on the stroller as if he could see straight through it. The air in the Room was thick with tension. While Mercer was focused on Melissa's words, Max was focused on something deeper, something Mercer couldn't see yet. Mercer had listened to her story. The gun, the escape, the fear in her eyes. He believed her. But there was a nagging feeling that wouldn't go away. Why hadn't she come forward sooner? Why didn't she trust the authorities? Something wasn't adding up, and Max was the only one who seemed to know it. "Max, you're not wrong," Mercer said quietly, watching the dog closely. Max's eyes didn't waver, his body tense and alert. He knew something Mercer didn't. Melissa, sitting across from him, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I told you everything," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't want to lie, but I had no choice." Mercer's eyes softened. "I believe you, Melissa, but I need to understand why you're hiding things. I need to know everything for your sake and your son's." Max's ears twitched, his gaze unwavering. Mercer glanced at him, then back at Melissa. There was still too much silence in her story. The pieces weren't fitting. "You said Robert was controlling, but how far did that control go?" Mercer asked. "What else has he done to you?" Melissa hesitated, her eyes flicking down to her lap. He made me do things. He controlled every part of my life. I couldn't leave without him knowing. He tracked my every move. But when I found out he was planning to take Benjamin, I couldn't let that happen." Mercer watched her closely, trying to see if she was hiding something. "What else did he do to make you run?" Max whined softly, his nose twitching in the air. He was restless, as if he was waiting for the right moment to speak the truth. Mercer turned to the dog, sensing that Max's instincts were pointing to something more than just Melissa's words. "Max," Mercer said gently. "What is it, girl?" Max stepped forward, still focused on the stroller, his tail slightly raised. It was as if he was waiting for Mercer to understand. There was something about the way Max was behaving, something beyond just a trained canine's instincts. He wasn't just reacting to the situation, he was reading the woman, sensing her every word and emotion. "You're telling me the truth, but Max is telling me there's more," Mercer said, his voice low. "Something is off, and it's not just the gun. What are you not telling me?" Melissa's face paled, and her lips trembled. She knew she couldn't hide from Mercer much longer. Max's unwavering loyalty was uncovering the cracks in her story, pulling at the threads she hadn't been ready to share. I didn't just take the gun for protection," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I had to get away. I was afraid that if I didn't, Robert would hurt Benjamin. I wasn't just running from him, I was running from everything he made me do. I was trapped." Mercer's heart clenched. He could hear the truth now, the deep layers of fear and pain. Max had known from the start. It wasn't just about the weapon. It was about the desperation in Melissa's voice, the silent plea for help that Max had picked up on immediately. "Max," Mercer murmured, crouching down to his canine partner. "You knew, didn't you? You could feel it." Max's gaze softened, as if to say, "Yes, I knew." Max had become more than just a canine. He was the key to unlocking the truth. The silent protector who had sensed the hidden fears long before Mercer could put them together. The dog's unshakable loyalty had uncovered the truth, and now it was up to Mercer to protect Melissa and her son. Mercer sat back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Melissa. What she had just told him was both heartbreaking and terrifying. It was the truth, but it was only part of it. Max, still by his side, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. The dog remained still, focused as if waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. "You don't understand," Melissa whispered, her voice shaking. "He was always there, always watching. Robert. He controlled everything, every phone call, every trip I made. I couldn't even talk to my own parents without him knowing." Mercer clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The more Melissa spoke, the clearer it became that Robert Keller wasn't just an abusive partner. He was a manipulator, a predator. He had controlled every aspect of her life, using fear and intimidation to keep her locked in a cage. He had a private investigator following me, Melissa continued, her eyes looking down at the floor. He knew where I went, who I talked to, everything. I felt trapped. I thought I could never escape. Max let out a soft growl, his eyes flicking toward Melissa as if urging her to go on. The dog had sensed the depth of the fear in her voice, and now it was clear. Max's instincts had been right from the start. You said you took the gun because you were afraid, Mercer said softly, leaning forward. But you didn't take it to smuggle something in. You took it to protect yourself. To protect Benjamin. Melissa nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I knew he'd come for us. He always said he'd take Benjamin away from me, that I'd never be able to leave. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just needed to get away. The gun, it was my lifeline. But healing wasn't as simple as just being free. It would take time. The scars, both physical and emotional, were deep. The road to recovery stretched out before them, uncertain and long, but they had each other now. And they had Max. Max had been there through it all, every step of the way. His loyalty and sharp instincts had saved them. Melissa couldn't stop thinking about how close they had come to losing everything. If it hadn't been for Max's unwavering presence, they might not have made it out. Thank you, Max, Melissa whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She sat on the couch, Benjamin curled up beside her, his small hand clutching hers. Max lay, at her feet, his body exhausted but still alert, her silent protector. Max lifted his head at the sound of her voice, his amber eyes softening as he looked at her. The connection between them was undeniable. She had been through so much, and Max had been by her side the whole time, never once faltering. You're part of our family now, Melissa said, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know what we would have done without you. Mercer, standing nearby, watched the emotional moment unfold. He had seen many things in his career, but there was something about the bond between Melissa and Max that struck him deep. The dog wasn't just an officer's partner. He was a savior, a friend, and a guardian. You were her lifeline, Mercer said, his voice quiet but filled with gratitude. Max kept us all safe. Max's ears flicked at the sound of his name. He had always been a dog of action, but there was a gentleness in his eyes now, as if he understood the depth of Melissa's words. I'm so sorry you had to go through all of this, Mercer continued, stepping closer. But you're safe now. We'll make sure you and Benjamin are taken care of from here on out. Melissa nodded, wiping her eyes. I just want to be normal again. I want to forget the fear, the control, everything. She glanced down at Benjamin, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. I want him to grow up in a world where he doesn't have to be afraid. Max nudged her gently, his head resting against her leg, offering the only comfort he knew how to give. Melissa ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the steady warmth of his body. It was as if he was telling her that everything would be okay. But the truth was, the road ahead would not be easy. The emotional wounds Robert had left would take time to heal. Melissa knew it would be a journey, and she wasn't sure how long it would take to find peace again. But one thing was certain, she wasn't alone. With Max by her side and the support of Mercer's team, she knew she could face whatever came next. Thank you, she whispered again, more to herself than anyone else. Max had given her back a chance at a life she thought she had lost forever. And with that, she found a new sense of hope. Mercer smiled softly as he watched the scene unfold. We'll get through this, he said, his eyes meeting Melissa's. Together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Melissa felt a glimmer of hope. And as she looked down at Max, she knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. Max had not only saved her life, he had given her the chance to rebuild it. Months had passed since Robert Keller was arrested. For Melissa and her son Benjamin, life was finally starting to feel normal again. They had settled into a routine, free from the constant fear that had once consumed them. Yet even with the passing of time, The memories of what they'd been through still lingered, reminders of the dark days that Max had helped them escape. Max, once just a canine officer, was now more than that. To Melissa, he wasn't just a dog, he was a hero. His unyielding loyalty had saved her life, and more importantly, he had given her and Benjamin a chance at something they hadn't thought possible. A future. "Max, come here, boy," Melissa called, out. Her voice filled with warmth as she knelt beside the dog. Max trotted over, his tail wagging in excitement. She ran her hands over his fur, a grateful smile crossing her face. "You saved us, you know that?" Max nudged her gently, his eyes soft as he sat down next to her. There was a bond between them, now something that went beyond words. Melissa had lived in constant fear, but Max had been her protector. He had sensed danger before anyone else, and he had been by her side when she needed him the most. "I don't think we could have made it without him," Melissa said to Mercer, who had been quietly watching the two of them. "He's not just a dog, he's family." Mercer smiled, his eyes reflecting the same gratitude. "He's more than that," he said, his voice filled with respect. "Max has saved more lives than anyone will ever know. His instincts, his loyalty, those are things you can't train. That's who he is." Melissa nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "I'll never be able to thank him enough. Max, ever the—" Professional seemed to sense the emotion in the air. He stood, his gaze shifting from Melissa to Mercer, as if acknowledging the conversation. He knew he had done his job, but it wasn't about the recognition, it was about the bond. Mercer looked at Max, his face softening. "You've been more than just a partner, Max. You've been a lifesaver. I'm proud to work with you." Max sat taller, his head slightly tilted, his eyes fixed on Mercer. He wasn't just a K9 anymore. He had become a symbol of hope, of protection, and of unwavering loyalty. For Melissa, Max's presence had changed everything. She had been broken, afraid to even trust her own shadow. But now, she felt safe. She could smile, laugh, and dream of the future without fear holding her back. "Whatever happens," Melissa said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "Max will always be a part of our family. A hero, forever." Mercer nodded, his hand resting on Max's head. "We'll continue to protect and serve together. That's what we do." Max's tail wagged, his eyes shining with pride. He didn't need words to understand the significance of the moment. He had completed his mission, and in doing so, he had given two people a chance to start over. As the sun began to set, Mercer, Max, and Melissa stood together, a family forged through trust, loyalty, and a shared experience that no one could ever take away. Max had not only saved their lives, he had given them hope, and that was something more powerful than anything else.